blessed day, everyone. This is Teacher June. Again, welcome to my channel. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos to come. In the previous tutorial video, we have learned how to factor polynomial with GCF or GCMF and also polynomials that are difference of two squares. This time, we are going to learn how to factor polynomials that are perfect square trinomials or factoring perfect square trinomials or PST. But before we'll be able to identify what perfect square trinomial is, let us first have a brief recall on special products. Kung naaalala natin yung special product, suppose we have the quantity a plus b squared. This polynomial here that is being squared, as we can see, is a binomial because it is consist of two terms, a and b. So the two terms or the binomial is being squared. So in special products, we call this one square of binomial. How are we going to get the product of this? First, we need to get the square of the first term, meaning a squared. That would be a squared. And then find the product of the first term and the second term multiplied by 2, meaning twice the product of a and b. So a times b, that would be ab, times 2, that would be 2ab. Positive because both of them are positive. Next is square of the second term or square of b. That would be b squared. So we have a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. How about if we have a minus b squared? The same as what we have done with the first example, what we're going to do is to get the square of the first term, that would be a squared, multiply the first term and the second term times 2, or twice the product of the first term and the second term, that would be a times negative b equals negative ab times 2, that would be negative 2ab. And the next, the square of the second term, we have b squared, that is b squared. So we have a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. In special products, ang tawag natin sa dalawang to are square of binomials. And their products are called perfect square trinomial. This square of binomials are the factored form, and this part here are perfect square trinomial. They are the product of these factors. So meaning, if we are going to get the factors of perfect square trinomial, it's just the other way around. Meaning, babaliktarin lang natin. Ito yung given, hahanapin natin yung factors na square of binomial. Okay? So, how will we be able to identify perfect square trinomial kung wala nito? Say, for example, we have a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. First condition is that the first term and the second term should be both perfect squares. Yung a squared at saka yung b squared, katulad din dito, a squared and b squared, they are both perfect squares. And also, the middle term should be twice the product of the square root of the first term and the third term. Meaning, if we get the square root of a squared, that would be a. The square root of b squared is b. So, a times b is ab times 2, that would be 2ab. Pansinin din natin na yung first term at saka yung last term, first term and the third term are always positive. So lagi nating tatandaan na kapag perfect square trinomial, the first term and the last term should be perfect squares. The middle term should be the product of the square root of a squared and b squared times 2, and also positive yung first term and last term. Okay, let us have an example. Suppose we have x squared plus 10x plus 25. Is this a PST or a perfect square trinomial? Notice that the first term is a perfect square. The last term or the third term is also a perfect square. The square root of 25 is 5. The square root of x squared is x. So 5 times x is 5x times 2, it's 10x. So therefore, this example here is really a perfect square trinomial. Now the question is, how will we be able to find the factors of a perfect square trinomial? Katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, yung factors ng perfect square trinomial are square of binomial. Paano yun? Okay, una, maglagay na tayo ng parenthesis squared. Kasi sabi nga natin kanina, square of binomial. So meaning, magkakaroon tayo dito ng binomial. Saan galing yung mga terms na yon? First, we have the square root of x squared, or the square root of the first term, that is x. And then, since the middle term is positive, so therefore, plus yung ilalagay natin. And then, next is the square root of the third term, meaning the square root of 25, that is 5. We have here a binomial x plus 5 that is being squared. So therefore, this one here is a square of binomial. And this one is the factored form of the perfect square trinomial x squared plus 10x plus 25. This part here is the PST, or the perfect square trinomial. And this one, the factored form, is what we call the square of binomial. Okay, let's proceed to another example. Suppose we have 4x squared minus 12x plus 9. Let us check whether this trinomial here is really a perfect square trinomial. Paano natin gagawin yun? Is the first term perfect square? Yes, 4x squared is indeed a perfect square. Is the third term a perfect square? Yes, 9 is a perfect square. So therefore, what we need to do is to get the square root of the first term. The square root of 4x squared is 2x. The square root of 9 is 3. And then multiply the 2. 2x times 3, that would be 6x. And then take note, the middle term should be twice the product of the square root of the first term and the third term. So twice, meaning yung 6x will be multiplied by 2. 6x times 2, that is 12x. So really, this given trinomial here is a PST, or perfect square trinomial. And to get its factored form, or to get its factor, we have, again, maglagay ng parentheses and then squared, because our factored form is square of binomial. So expected magkakaroon tayo dito ng binomial. Okay, first, we get the square root of the first term. What is the square root of 4x squared? That is 2x. And since the middle term is negative, therefore, ang ilalagay natin na operation dito is minus. And then next, the square root of the third term. What is the square root of 9? That is 3. So meaning the factored form of this perfect square trinomial here is the quantity 2x minus 3 squared. Okay, let's have another example. We have here 16y squared plus 56y plus 49. How are we going to get its factors or its factored form? Okay, let us test first whether this trinomial here is really a PST or perfect square trinomial. Get the square root of the first term. Square root of 16y squared is 4y. Square root of 49 is 7. Get the product of the square root of the first term and the square root of the second term. 4y times 7, that is 28y. And then the middle term should be twice the product of the square root of the first term and the third term. So meaning 28y times 2, that would be 56. And with that, we are pretty sure that this trinomial here is really a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so let us now get its factor or find its factored form. Okay, what is the square root of the first term? The square root of 16y squared is 4y. So we have the first term here would be 4y. And then since the middle term is positive, so the operation between this binomial here would be plus or addition or positive. And then next is the square root of the third term, that is 7. So yung 7, ilalagay natin doon. And this one here is the factored form of the perfect square trinomial 16y squared plus 56y plus 49. Okay, next. What if we have 5m squared minus 30m plus 45? Okay, let us check first if this trinomial here is really a perfect square trinomial or PST. 5m squared, is the first term perfect square? 5 is not a perfect square, so therefore this is not a PST. And also 45, which is the third term, is not also a perfect square. So what are we going to do with this? Notice that if we are going to take a look at each term of this trinomial, meron tayong common factor or greatest common factor or GCF katulad ng lesson natin in the previous video. 5m squared, negative 30m, and 45. Among the numerical coefficients 5, 30, and 45, what do you think is the GCF? The greatest number that can divide the three of them or the GCF is 5. So meaning, i-apply natin yung knowledge natin dito on how to factor polynomials with GCF. So the GCF is 5. So all we need to do is to divide each term of the trinomial by 5. Okay, let's start. 5m squared divided by 5, that is m squared. Negative 30m divided by 5, that is negative 6m. And then positive 45 divided by 5, that is positive 9. Okay, this time we have two factors, 5 and the quantity m squared minus 6m plus 9. Notice that this second factor here is actually a perfect square trinomial. Let us test if this really is a perfect square trinomial. The first term is a perfect square. The third term is also a perfect square. The middle term is the product of the square root of the first term and the last term. The square root of m squared is m. The square root of 9 is 3. So that is 3 times m, that is 3m, times 2, that is 6m. So therefore, we can apply our knowledge in factoring perfect square trinomial here. So what are we going to do with 5? All we need to do is just copy 5 or bring down 5, and then we'll factor this out using PST. Pag nagpa-factor tayo ng PST, maglagay na agad tayo ng pair of parentheses squared because its factors is the square of binomial. First, what is the square root of m squared? That is m. Since the middle term here is negative, so the operation between the two terms here would be subtraction, minus, and that is negative. And then square root of the third term is 3. So we have the factor of 5m squared minus 30m plus 45 is equal to 5 times the quantity m minus 3 squared. So dito sa last example natin, we have applied two methods in factoring. The first one is factoring polynomials with GCF, as we have done in the first line of our solution. And the second one is factoring perfect square trinomials. Okay, so I hope you understand. God bless everyone and good day.